There's a real common problem that plagues rear-engine Volkswagens. What it is, the plastic bushing that supports the rod which runs from the gear stick in the front to the coupler at the transmission in the back, over time just disintegrates and falls to bits. In the 13 years I've owned this bug, I've replaced it twice already, and I think I'm about to go through it all over again. It's a very simple setup. There's just a ball on the base of the gear stick which pivots in a cup mounted to the end of the shift rod, and the shift rod runs all the way to the back and connected to the gearbox by a coupler. Now the shift rod obviously runs through a bushing at the front just behind the gear stick where it's supported. It's a metal housing with a plastic bushing in the housing which the shift rod runs through. Now it's very common for that to fall apart over time, and the first symptoms you tend to get are a very sloppy gear shift. Now, as I just mentioned, I replaced mine a few years ago as it was getting very sloppy, and my bushing was in fact split in half. Now, the car's giving the exact same symptoms all over again. If I just put it into gear, I have a lot of slop there. Normally there's minimal movement when it's in gear, just a little bit of sideways movement in neutral. Car still shifts fine, but the other problem I'm getting is when I accelerate through the gears, particularly from low revs, I get a horrible rattle unless I hold the gear stick, and that's also a sign that the bushing has fallen apart. So another sign is if you've got a real clunky metal noise like that when you move the gear stick side to side, particularly when it's in gear, that's a sign the bushing's no longer in its hanger. The noise is the metal rod banging from side to side. So I'm just going to pull out this gear stick first and just have a look and see whether the new bushing that I put in a few years ago has broken again, or if it's just popped out of its hanger. I've got the seats and the front carpet pulled out now, and the downside to that is living on a farm means we have our fair share of dust, and that means my cars and their carpet get absolutely full of it. So I now have lungs full of dust. Yay. So here's how my poor bug looks with only half an interior, and here's how I sound dying of dust inhalation, so sorry about that, folks. I pull both the seats out because this is a really greasy, messy job, and I don't want to cover my seats in grease. Now the first step is to remove the gear stick. Now the two bolts that hold it down, the hole that they go through is slotted. That way the whole base assembly there can be moved forward and back and side to side, because that is how the gear shifter is aligned. If it's too far one way, you'll probably end up trying to get reverse when you're going for second gear, which makes a very pleasant racket. So before you go removing it, it's a good idea to put some marks where everything sits. I've done this too many times and know where it all goes, so I'm not going to, but just a couple for front and back alignment as well as side to side. And there it is out. Okay, same deal as last time, the bushing's split in half. So I've been and got myself a new one. That's the animal there. And what's happened both times is this groove here where it rides in the hanger. As you can see, it's very thin in that area, and it's just wearing through pretty quick. The joy of cheap replacement part. So under the back seat lives a battery and a whole heap of messy Subaru wires, and usually that cover plate there is over the top of that hole. This is a shift rod coupler here which connects the rod to the gearbox, and I'm going to have to disconnect that, and you can just see it's got a bolt which runs straight through it. Got to hold that funky looking square thing to unscrew the bolt out of it. So there's the next step. So there's the bolt and centre bit, whatever you want to call it, out of the coupler. We can see that the rod is now free. So the next step is to spin the cup upside down, which you can do by just turning it at this end. We want the cup facing down. Okay, so here's where things start getting different depending on what model bug you've got. What has to happen now is the whole shift rod, which goes from the coupler there up to the gear stick, now has to be slid all the way forward and out of the hanger. The hanger's just at the back of the gear stick hole there. And Super Beetles like this, which have the strut front end, luckily have enough room in the tunnel and in the front of the bulkhead to get it all the way forward without having to do anything. But if this was a standard Beetle with the torsion bar front suspension, there's not enough clearance in the front to get the rod all the way out of the hanger. And so they make special inspection plates. There's 3 all up that need removing. The first one is in the back of the front of the bulkhead where the beam bolts up. Now I'll insert a picture from my black Beetle, which had a radiator in the spare wheel well, so you can see where the plate is. And just a picture of my yellow bug showing the 2 inspection ports which need removing. It's a bit hard to see in that sticky gooey mess of grease there, but there's actually a metal ring, kind of like a key ring, which goes around the old bushing, and it has to come off the rod and be fitted to the new bushing. So because I'm not removing the rod from the car, I have the fun game of sliding the rod out toward the front of the car a couple inches at a time, then moving that little circlip back so it's always visible in this hole, and by the time the end comes I can pull it off the end of the rod and stick it on the new bushing. Now if you've got skinny arms like me, you can fit them down that hole for a bit anyway and push the rod forward until it becomes out of reach, and then it's a very slow process of inching it forward through that hole with needle nose pliers. So I'll get it as far as forward as I can, at the same time keeping that circlip visible. So I've been slowly inching that forward, keeping the metal circlip visible. Fortunately for me, I have small fingers as well, and I've been doing it by hand. As it gradually runs out of support, it will fall lower and lower and probably hook up on everything like it's trying to do now. I've got fuel injection hoses and all sorts in there, which it's going to try and tangle on for me. Oh, hell. So I've got it all the way forward. There's the end of it there. Circlip's still on the end of it. And there's the hanger. So now I've got to fish that circlip off the end and stick it on the new bushing and put the new bushing in the hanger there. And out it comes with its own flavours of crustaceans. So I've got the circlip all cleaned up and put on the new bushing. It sits in that front groove like that. So I've just put a bit of grease on the outside of the new bushing just to help it slip into the hanger, and remembering to get the orientation correct. The groove of the circlip goes towards the front of the car. And there's the new bushing in the hanger. Always a fun job to do without dropping it. But if you do drop it, all you need is the trusty wire hook to pick it up and fish it out. So now I'm going to have to clean up the end of that rod a bit and grease it up with lots of grease. Now I'm sure there's plenty of sexual innuendos for the next step, but to get the rod in through the bushing, I find the best way is a piece of wire with a hook on it to hold the rod at the right height, and then grab the rod with the needle nose pliers, plenty of grease, and force it through the bushing. And that's how easy it is. I've had too much practice at this. So now that that's started, the messy part begins, which is greasing up that rod as it's fed through inch by inch with the needle nose pliers. Made more challenging by the fact that it's going to want to hook up on every single obstruction in that tunnel, like the accelerator cable guide tube, clutch cable guide tube, fuel line, handbrake cables, heater cables, seatbelt bolts, you name it, there's obstructions in there. But a bit of patience and you will get there eventually. There it is, home. Now just got to grease it up a bit better. So I've got in and cleaned all that old sticky tar-like grease out of the cup and filled it up with some fresh new stuff. Also a good idea just to give the coupler a good clean up and make sure the two blocks are in good shape and there's no cracks or anything with the cage. I find it easiest to install a coupler now before the shifter, because it allows you to spin the shift rod with the cup sideways so that the hole's facing up and down. Just makes getting the screw and that insert part through a lot easier when you can just drop it straight in from above. You're not trying to feed it in from the side. All the shifter stuff just needs a good grease up before it's put back together. Lots of grease, particularly on the ball at the bottom of the gear stick and down in the socket where the mushroom part pivots, and it's ready to go back in. But firstly, the shift gate. The orientation of this has to be absolutely correct. It can only go two ways, but only one way's right. It's got to have the bigger curved up one to the right hand side of the car. So driver's side in a right hand drive car, passenger side if you're in US of A or other left hand drive countries. So that sits there, and the gear shift just plonks down and bolted in place. And there it is, all finished. Just ignore the spacer underneath. That's my quick shift kit that I've just put back in. I managed to fluke perfect alignment the first time. I usually go by eye at first. When I bolt it down, I just slide the shift gate around so that when it's pushed all the way to the left, but in neutral, it's pretty much perfectly vertical. If it's leaning to the left a little bit, you'll find it will bind with reverse and second gear and give a horrible grinding noise. Or if it's a little bit to the right, you'll find you won't be able to get reverse. So it's just a matter of tweaking it around, but it moves the opposite way to what the gear is that you're having problems. So it's a little confusing. If you're having problems with first and second gear, or more likely reverse, it would be moved to the right. Or if you're having problems with it binding with reverse, like it's getting reverse instead of second gear, you'd move it further to the left. And that's about it. Nice and tight now. No more clunky noises anymore. Only my gearbox. And let's see how long it lasts this time.